Hi everybody, welcome to the Studio of Art with Lisa. Today we're going to do a fun class on just everything a pencil can do. Let's start with our supplies. I have here a number 2 pencil or an HB pencil if you have a collection of pencils, a mechanical pencil, a kneaded eraser, or you can use a gum eraser or even the eraser on the bottom of your pencil. I have a Kleenex, a couple Q-tips, something called a blending tortillon. All 3 of these are used for blending. And when we move to the toned paper, we're going to use a charcoal pencil, black and white. So let's get started. Grab yourself a piece of white paper, or if you have some toned paper, gray or tan, that would be fine also. I'm going to put a couple pieces of tape so my paper stays where I want it to while I'm talking today. Another thing you might have on hand is an extra piece of paper to put under your hand so when we start working, it doesn't smear your work. So let's start with just the basic things that a pencil can do. Like, really, how do you hold your pencil? There's a couple different ways. The most common way is something that we're all used to. And that's the way we hold a pencil to write with. It's given our wrist a lot of muscle memory about the angles that we use, about the comfort of holding the pencil in our hands. But I want you to think about something. The angles that your wrist can go are fairly limited when you're drawing with your pencil like this. So this will work for a lot of sketching and when you need to have your pencil in an upright position. But when you need to get bigger strokes, say you're trying to do a curved line. If we start here and we go here, about right here is when it starts to require that our elbow bend more, and then we can't be sure that it's going to be straight. What if you would engage your whole shoulder? That can sometimes be done using the method called overhand, where you hold your pencil and you're holding your index finger and your thumb on either side of it. It's more in a sketching position, and you can really engage your whole shoulder, like clear out of the page here. If you had a big piece of paper or newsprint, when you're using your shoulder to get rotation, you get a lot more arc to an angle. So those are the 2 ways you can hold it, the standard way or overhand. This is also nice for sketching when you're wanting to get big, wide strokes in your sketches. You can do nice, big strokes like this with your pencil like that. You can still do them this way, but you'll notice that when you hold your pencil straight up and down, it's really hard to get it down flat on the paper without going into some kind of contortion that's pretty strange unless you go this way or that way. So you'll find when you want to do big sketching, it's nice to be able to hold your pencil like this, overhand, and you can almost put the pencil parallel to the paper, and you can get a much more uniform kind of blending on your sketches. So that's tip number 1. Also, when you're using a standard pencil, of course you'd want to have a sharpener handy, but you can actually do self-sharpening. When you hold your pencil in this overhand position, you can you're actually turning the pencil itself as you are shading, and it will sharpen it right to a knife point edge. So that's a trick if you don't have a sharpener. As long as you've got enough lead showing, you can keep sharpening that by just rotating the pencil as you shade. Some people like to sketch with a mechanical pencil, and I do quite a bit also, partly because you can always just keep clicking more lead down, or you can fill it more from the top with more lead. You can get the same kind of sketching with it. You can choose the different kinds of lead, harder or softer. You can still hold it on its side, and you can get fairly thick, but as you can see, you can't get quite as meaty of a stroke as you can when you've got this much more lead showing than you have on a mechanical pencil. So those are some things to think about when you're choosing your pencil. Now, let's talk about different strokes. People think a pencil is just a pencil. It can only do one thing. Well, a pencil is a pretty amazing tool. So let's try some different methods of using our pencil. Obviously, line is one thing. When you have a really sharp pencil, you can get just a knife point line. And you can tell that you can change that by the pressure of your pencil. If you press hard, you can make it a really definite line. If you let up on the pressure, you can almost make it disappear and then get it harder again. So practice some of those strokes, just the pressure of your pencil, having it straight up and down, going hard and then light on your pressure, and get used to the pressure of your pencil, which is one form of controlling what you're going to be drawing. So go lighter and darker, curvy lines, get that shoulder loosened up, try to get your elbow loosened up. The tighter you hold your pencil and the closer you're holding like this, when your knuckles are turning white, you're going to get muscle soreness from hanging on too tight to that pencil. So try to keep a loose grip, a loose elbow, a loose shoulder when you're doing your sketching. So another kind of line is just a sketchy line. And this can be done in a straight line where you actually make the line itself move with a sketchy motion. Or some people like to, when they're going to make say they're going to make a circle, they like to sketch it where there's actually sketchy lines. It almost makes a hairy line going around for a circle, as opposed to just drawing a single circle with a single line. Either one's fine. They both have a totally different look to them. Some people just feel like they have to take short, choppy sketches to be in control of things, and oftentimes the bigger they get, the more sketchy they get. Once again, that can also be caused by the limitations of the angle your wrist can go when you're holding the pencil like this. When you're holding your pencil over the top, you can get much more angle in your stroke. So that sketchy look is another kind where you're just actually making short strokes, using a lot of wrist action, and again, you get kind of a hairy line. So practice with that. Do a few of those and see what that looks like and what that feels like. It has its place. There are certain drawings that really benefit from that kind of look. All right, now if we try that overhand position, you can actually make a really wide line with just your pencil. Even though it's a tiny point at the end, if you turn it on its side, you can get a big, thick line out of that pencil. You're holding it almost flat down against the paper, and you can get a really, really bold line, thick and sometimes expressive if you're trying to get that. So practice some of those where you're doing bold lines and just moving your pencil back and forth, trying different things. Try different things with it. Just doodling. All right? Then you can actually get almost a calligraphic look with your pencil. If you have a really sharp pencil, by changing the direction of your angle, you can go from a thin line. Say we start with a thin line, and then I turn my pencil so it's on edge, and I can actually make it wider. And then I can come back almost straight forward, and then I press all the way down, and I can make it wider. So you can almost get a calligraphic look like this. So try that, where you're just the tip of it is touching as you go around the corner, and then you lay it down flat on the paper, get a wide stroke, and then lift it up just to the tip, down in a wide stroke. Lift it up just to the tip, down to the wide stroke. Isn't that fun? So I'm going to sharpen my pencil here for a minute. An electric pencil sharpener is a lifesaver, but the little hand ones work also. Okay, well, let's try some different types of shading. So if you want to shade something, obviously the most common one is just using your pencil. And I would do this again with the overhand, where you can get a nice, thick, wide swath. And you start out shading really, really dark. And then you start lightening on the pressure. And you can see that the value actually starts to change. And you can just barely have a hold on that and come all the way down to white. So that's probably the most common way to shade. Now, another way to shade with a pencil is called cross-hatching, where you draw little short lines, and they're usually fairly parallel. They don't have to be perfect, but they're going right next to each other, choppy little lines like this. Maybe they come further apart as they come down to make it look lighter. And then you would go back in and change the angle of your lines and do the same thing, going the opposite direction. This is called cross-hatching. And so you can get the same a similar kind of gradation using this technique, and your lines would just get farther apart and lighter pressure, but that's kind of a neat effect. Practice some of those. Now we can also just use random squiggly lines where you're just going round and round and round, no rhyme or reason, almost like tangled yarn, and you're just going back and forth in random shapes and directions. Sometimes they're circles, sometimes they're zigzagging back and forth, but the more you overlap them, obviously the darker the effect you're going to get. And then as you come away, maybe you're not going back over it so many times, but you're still going random shapes back and forth, lightening your pressure maybe again, so it's getting lighter and lighter. Your values are changing to lighter, but this is just kind of a fun, relaxing doodle, almost Zentangle kind of look, where you're actually creating value by, once again, just the pressure and the density of the lines. So that's another fun way. All right, sharpening my pencil again. So one more way, and this is kind of an old illustrative way. It almost kind of looks like wood cutting, and it's actually just straight lines right next to each other. And to make them darker, obviously, they have to be very close to each other. And then as they move down, and as you want it to look like it's getting lighter, you would start to separate them a little further, even further, till you're exaggeratedly far apart. And again, you have the illusion of gradation in your lines. So that's another fun method. One last one I'll show you is just random shapes. And again, the amount of them, if we were just to go jagged lines like this, where it's almost like grass clippings just kind of laying in there, and they're randomly shaped, different directions. Over the top here where we want it to be dark, they're layered and layered and layered over each other. And this is almost well, it would be an impressionistic look if you were to shade an entire painting like this, or a picture, I should call it. And when you're doing something in pencil, it's considered a drawing. So as you were to come further, your lines, and they would all be different sizes, different directions, maybe different densities, different pressures, but we're layering them less and less as we come down, and they're getting more and more random as they descend into a lighter value until there's just almost nothing. So those are some fun tricks that you can try with pencil, and how to shade, how to get gradation and value and line width. Now, another option is to be able to do this on a toned paper. And there are charcoal pencils, there's oil pastel pencils, there's all different kinds of pencils. But on a toned paper, you get another effect where you get to not only have the values, but let's say we're drawing, well, let's say we're drawing, I'm just going to start with a general circle, all right? So we draw our circle like this, leave some lost edges here. I go ahead and shade in here like I would with a regular pencil, my darkest values on one side. Come around, leave it lighter there. We've studied this. If you've been following along in our drawing lessons, we've watched how to make common shapes come to life with values, bring form to things. So this is just kind of repeating that, where we're coming to a light source. We're bringing the gradation from the darkest dark up to light, coming all the way around. Maybe we've got a shadow coming underneath it. Since our light's coming from here, then the darkest dark would be underneath the base of this object. And this is the traditional shading, like we talked about very first, where we're just really filling in the area with either the pencil or the charcoal pencil, and then getting lighter and lighter as we go away. Now, if we were to go in, you remember me showing you a couple things that we could blend with in the beginning. We have three options here. One of them is called the tortillon, which is commonly used by artists for blending pencil and graphite, Kleenex if you're in a bind, or Q-tips, and all three work. The idea is to go in and blend the actual graphite or charcoal into the paper. And so these are all paper fibers on the Q-tip, in the Kleenex, and then the tortillon. And you would just lightly go back over what you were wanting to shade, and you'll start to see a really nice smooth blend come by using this. So here's how the Q-tip works, which is a pretty common thing for most people to have in their household, as well as a Kleenex. That's how you would go in. You'll see that the Q-tip actually picks up some of the graphite, and you can go back in and sketch sometimes with what you get on your blending tool. So that's how the Q-tip works. The Kleenex would be used by taking it over the top of your pencil, making a sharp point, wrapping it around the pencil so you have a pointed edge there, and you can go back in and do the same kind of thing and continue blending with that, and you've got a little more control than a round edged Q-tip. So this would give you the same kind of effect where you can go in and just blend in, smooth out that gradation from the lightest to the darkest. Again, you'll see that it's picked up on the Kleenex, and you can use that if you want to draw somewhere else. I'm going to use the tortillon. It's what we commonly use in the art world for blending, and it works for pencils, charcoal, pastel. It's a great little tool. They come in packs. They're very inexpensive, and they're really great to use. They come in all different shapes and lengths, and this one's a pretty standard size. So I'm going in and I'm just softening the edges. This is the blending, standard blending that you would do for an object with pencil or graphite. And we're going to go ahead and fill this in with the shadow. And what I'm really wanting to show you is that when you do this on the toned paper, you can go back in with a white charcoal pencil and really pop the highlights. You can go back around the edge of that object, and because it's on the toned paper, it really lifts it off the paper and gives it some real life. So if we were to go in like this, go back over where that highlight was going to be, little reflected light down here. We might be able to make this look like a marble. It's kind of fun to play around with this toned paper and see the effects that you can get with it. A little bit of light on this back side here. And there might even be a little bit of a reflected light underneath from the glass of the marble, coming out away from the reflection. So isn't that fun? That's a standard kind of blending with a charcoal pencil. Just some fun things you can do playing around. So if you have that in your kit, try those on some of this toned paper. Get some really cool effects. Blending from light into dark. Remembering all your laws of shadow and reflection, where the highlights are. Then you can come back in with your tortillon to blend a little bit in or out. You might want to soften up edges or go back around something. Come back in maybe with another stripe, like this is a marble that's got different colors in it. Just have fun playing around with these. You can give all kinds of illusion, and all you're using is graphite. That's the fun, exciting thing about pencil and charcoal, is you can still get some amazing effects with it. Black and white. It's great to learn your values. Be really strong with your values before you head into painting. So there's a fun example of shading. Now let's try some of those other things that we were looking at. What if we were wanting to use the crosshatch look? Well, let's say we were going to draw, let's draw a mailbox. So we just have our basic shape here. And we want to go in and show that this is on a post and there's light coming from the front, and we want this backside to look shadowed. So this is how I'd start in with my cross hatching. Those lines that are just kind of right next to each other, kind of fading out, flicking off at the end. They're not going to a hard edge. And then I would come back in another direction and just go back over them. And you can see it's kind of still giving the illusion that this mailbox is darker on this side and going up over the top. Then on the front, there might be a little bit different light. So our lines would be further apart, but still cross-hatched. This is a middle value we're doing. Then we come underneath the mailbox, and it's really dark under here because it's not getting any light. So my lines would be really close together underneath there, right up under the mailbox. And then as it comes away, of course, they come apart. And then I'd go back in, opposite direction, darken that up even more, really bold. And then they come apart as they come away. And same on the front edge, it's getting a little more light. Still underneath there, so I'm wanting to show that. But my lines get further apart and they go back in, switch direction. And you can see I'm still doing quite a bit of shading with just these cross hatches. And the flag is partly up, partly down. And I just go in really dense lines this time. Cross hatch both directions. The lid is out. And there you have a mailbox. Now, what about using just the straight lines? How could we use that? Well, it's almost a woodcut kind of look. What if we were to draw just a simple silhouette? Let's say we've got some trees. And it's on a little island here. All right, so we're just doing kind of a graphic shape. We could go back in with just the straight lines, pretty dense up here on the trees, because they're right up against that sun or moon. And this is where your straight lines would come in. And as they got closer to the top, where they were in contrast against the bright light, they would just get closer and closer together as they come down. So I'm just using straight lines here. Now the reflection that would come out from this might have broken lines of the same, because the water is moving. So here's my bank. And here's the reflection of those trees with straight lines only. So you can see we're kind of still getting the illusion of values just from straight lines. So one last one. Let's do something with those lines that were just really fun and all over the place. Say we were going to do a stylized flower. We could start right in here with those crazy lines going all over different directions. Really dark. And then as it comes out and around, we still want it to kind of look lighter on this flower, so our pressure gets lighter and we actually don't layer them as much. Tight little circles maybe down here, maybe the size changes, maybe the amount of layering. And then we do the same thing on some of the petals. Darker towards the bottom, light as we come away. It's just a stylized look. Play around with that. Find just any old shape that you want to try. And just go in and do some fun, funky little different shapes to try to shade things and see what kind of effects you can get. Totally stylized and different. So I hope you had fun. Oh, what a pencil can do. This was another great lesson of studying pencil. The basic foundation of being an artist is knowing how to draw. And once you've got that, the sky's the limit. Thanks for joining us here. You can take the concepts that you learned here on value and line and shading, and you can go to any of the next classes on drawing. Have a great time. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.